If you don't know our guest by now, you haven't really been listening. I quote him all the time, incessantly, because he is the one, the only, James Beard award-winning, for the first ever cocktail book no less, cocktail historian extraordinaire, the Dean of Cocktails. I'm Susan Schwartz, your drinking companion, and this is Lush Life Podcast. Every week we are inspired to live life one cocktail at a time. If you want to know the history of the cocktail you're sipping right now, David Wondrich is the one to ask. Author of Imbibe, Punch, Esquire Drinks, co-host of Drinks podcast Life Behind Bars, and so much more. He is one of my heroes, and here with me today. But before we begin, I wanted to tell you about an event that is coming up to benefit the Drinks Trust, which has provided care and support to the drinks industry since 1886. On Tuesday, the 1st of December from 6 to 7:30, on Zoom, they are having a holiday cocktail party run by David Wood of Liana Cocktail Company. You can find out more on lushlifemanual.com. Now on to David. There is a year that really is like the year of cocktail mythology, okay? And I believe that year is 1999. It isn't even an urban myth because these things really happened. No, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, I will. So far, I agree with you.
Because I know you're a historian. Number one, the first thing that happened in 1999 is Milk and Honey was born.
Yep.
That's the rumor on the street. Number two was when you first started writing about alcohol, at least. Now, is that true?
That is true. Yes. That's when
a very good year.
Yeah. I mean, I got a phone call at the very end of the year, the same month that Milk and Honey opened, it turned out, asking me to do a cocktail project for Esquire magazine's website. At the time, I was writing about music for the Village Voice and for the New York Times Sunday magazine, or not the magazine, the Arts and Leisure section. And my friend knew that, and he knew I liked cocktails, and I had a few cocktail books. And he asked if I could take this old Esquire Drinks book and adapt it for the web because somebody had reprinted it and Esquire wasn't seeing any revenue from that reprint. And they were a little ticked. And they said, well, let's just put it up online. Let's let everybody have it. And I, being an academic at the time, immediately started editing and cutting and pasting and categorizing and all that kind of thing. And Esquire liked that and gave me the job. So I started small, but Esquire liked it. And it turned into a drink of the week on their website, which was way more fun than my academic job. And in the fullness of time, that led to a book. And then I quit my academic job, and I've been doing this ever since. So,
well, listen, I'm going to cheers to that because
you find me without a drink.
Well, it is earlier there than it is
It's
here.
much earlier, and I have a full day of work ahead of me. So,
and this is kind of a twist on the one that you gave me, which is the improved Holland gin cocktail, because I didn't have orange curacao, so I put Grand Marnier in. So cheers to that.
Same thing. That's fine. I'll raise a glass of water. Cheers.
Oh, cheers. Cheers to that. The year that everything changed. We're going to go back because the conversation is about how you got to where you are now.
Okay.
And so let's start at the beginning. I believe that we are both Pennsylvanians. I'm from the Philadelphia side and you're from the other side.
I was born in Pittsburgh, but I only lived there till I was 8. So I'm sort of a fake Pittsburgher.
And where'd you go after that?
Evanston, Illinois for 4 years, and then Brooklyn for a few months, and then Long Island.
All right, so suburbs. Like a New Yorker.
Yeah, basically a New Yorker.
We all know that you were well, a lot of us know who are listening that you were a professor, but you were a musician before that. And was that something that you always loved growing up? Was music?
Not really. I got into music. I always listened to the radio in the 70s when I was a kid. In my formative adolescent years, it was always AM pop, which was a very mixed thing at the time. There was as much like Al Green as there was Pink Floyd. So it was very, very cool mix, and that kind of formed my taste. But I had no particular strong interest. And then the punk revolution happened, and punk rock was very much for me. That
Was there
was
one band that you just loved over all of them?
the Ramones and the Sex Pistols were my two.
Mhm.
And I learned how to play bass when I was really pretty late. I was 18, I think. And so it was 79. And started, jumping up and down on stage and playing bass very badly, which I eventually played bass a little bit better. And I kept it up for about 10 years. And then I finally quit. But for a while there, I was pretty serious about it.
And were you going to university at the same time
I
as
was until
playing?
I dropped out. And I dropped out after about 3 years just to play in bands.
I
And
assume I assume you had a band. And
oh
did you
yeah,
tour and
I
do all that?
toured. I did all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Are there any hidden, like on Spotify? Which I did do, by the
No,
way. I did put David Wondrich in Spotify, and it
no.
came to one song that you wrote for some kind of compilation with other cooks and chefs and things.
Oh yeah. There's a mint julep song that oh God, I'm blanking on their name. Wonderful band Michael Hurst and his crew did. But anyway, no, there's only one of the songs I played on made it on record at the time. I have a lot of demos that we did for record companies, but in the early 80s, record companies weren't signing anybody. They were blindsided by punk and new wave. They didn't understand it. They wanted to understand it. So they were very, very cautious. As a result, they didn't make any money. And then by the late 80s, they decided to sign everybody and let the market figure it out. And that worked better for them, but I was too early for that. So I just have a bunch of demos that eventually I'll get all digitized and so on.
Well, I hope so. And as a result, obviously, of them not signing you, we have you as the greatest cocktail historian, or the dean of cocktails, should we say. So you went back to university.
I did.
Did you know, had you been an English major before you dropped out? Was that something that you knew
I was
you
an
wanted
English
to do?
major before I dropped out. Yep. Just by default, I didn't know what else to do. I kind of wanted to be a writer, but I was an absolutely terrible writer. I was just pretentious and this extremely, extremely bad writer at the time. And I have pros to prove it that I'm never going to show anybody. But oh my God, it was bad. But I switched to music, and I was better at that. Not to say I was great, but I was better at it. And I really enjoyed that. I loved playing in bands, that part of it. I just didn't like the music business part. And when I didn't get signed by the time I was 25, I was smart enough to realize that I probably was not going to.
Well, you could have done anything in the world. Why did you decide to go back to university?
Because I wanted a better job. Okay. Well, actually, I originally thought that I would try to get a diplomatic job because I speak Italian and I'm pretty good with languages. I grew up speaking Italian. My father was Italian. So
we're going to get to that because
okay.
I speak Italian as well. On Twitter, you have referenced a lot of Italian, and I've answered back with Italian. And I
remember that. Yeah.
Yes. So your dad was from Italy originally.
Yeah. He came to America in the 50s. Wondrich is a name from Trieste, and he was half Sicilian and half Triestino. So it's a crazy mix. And
yes, of course. The last name doesn't end in a vowel. I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah.
But it's still Italian. My family are plenty Italian over there.
So you decided. So were you were going to study English again?
Well, I was going to finish my English degree, and then I graduated and started I thought I would get a quick master's in political science.
And, I love it. A quick master's. Yeah.
Well, it was like 2 years. It was not that long. And at that point, college was very easy for me because I'd been in the workforce for a long time, and college is way easier than working, So I started this political science program. And after about 3 months, I realized I just could not do it because the books are just illegible to me. I hated the books, and I couldn't spend the rest of my life reading political science books. So I walked over to the comparative literature department at NYU where I was, and I talked to them, and the professor I talked to at the end of our talk said, "Well, we can't give you a lot of money." I was like, "Wait a minute, you're going to give me money?"
Exactly.
And basically I was paid to read books for the next 5 years. So
during that time, were you drawn to bars, cocktail drinking? Did you have a favorite? Again, here's the 27 questions in a row. Was that something part of your life?
Oh, yeah. I was always drawn to bars ever since I was a teenager. bars were where I learned how to be American. I was half American. I spent a lot of time in Italy as a kid, and that, sort of set me aside from a lot of my peers at the time. And if you just hang out at the bar and watch people, you'll learn a lot about them, I think. And
You
yeah,
said
go
it's
ahead.
where you learn. Sorry, it's where you learn to be American, but you have this Italian background. Were you ordering? I guess I'm going to say pompous at the time. Things like
Oh, hell no.
Negronis and
Oh, hell
no,
no. Hell
no,
no.
no.
No,
This
no, no,
is
no, no.
uh,
No,
uh,
I was drinking shots of whiskey and quarter beers.
uh,
I mean, really, gin and tonic was as fancy as I got. So yeah, and I was always interested in that. I was always interested in convivial literature, things like P.G. Wodehouse, where Jeeves is always mixing up the cocktails, and Philip Marlowe books set in dark, smoky bars. I always liked that kind of stuff.
mm.
And New York had so many great bars, like just divey old man bars that were very cheap. I was very poor, so I couldn't drink at the fancy bars, but I could definitely drink at O'Donnell's and the Glockamora and all these places. The Park Inn, notorious.
Yeah, of course. I lived in New York for a long time. I remember the Park Inn.
Oh
Um,
boy, that was a dive. No, that was a dive.
I think I may have gone in once and said maybe this is not for me.
Yeah, no, I liked that place, but that place was rough. It was there definitely shit happened there that shouldn't have happened anywhere. But oh
Uh,
well.
so you were going to the bars plus studying. Did you have an idea of, after you came out of university, what you were going to do with the degree?
Well,
Or
not
did you
with
kind of
the
fall
not
into it?
not with the English degree. I thought I'd
Mm,
do the political science, like I said, and
right.
then comparative literature. There's only one thing you're supposed to do with that degree is become a professor, and I was resigned to that. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I said, okay, I'll try to get an academic job because that's what they tell you do with this thing. And I did. I was fortunate enough to find one in New York. Not a great one, but it was in New York, and I
Mm.
really didn't want to leave. There were only a couple cities in America I was interested in living in at the time, and New York was far and away the first one. I was a New Yorker before I was an academic, and I preferred to stay that. I was teaching English, which was not what I was interested in. I was interested in classical literature. I was interested in Arabic. I'd studied Arabic in grad school for years. I've forgotten all of it, unfortunately, but I have remembered all my Latin, so that's good.
Well, it's funny. I read that if you could have a drink with anyone, it would be Ovid.
That's true.
I
The
wanted to know
wittiest,
if that was
yeah.
still true.
Oh, yeah, the wittiest person who ever lived, I think.
He's, of course, said some things that we say today. They're out of my mind right now. But did he ever say anything about drinking?
It wasn't his main topic, let's say, but there's some scenes of drunken debauchery in the Metamorphoses. Things don't end well, but there's a bunch of that stuff. And he wasn't the great Roman poet of wine and song. Women, yes, but he was still. I'm sure he would be happy to hoist a sociable glass,
Oh,
and
yeah, I'm sure.
especially if you caught him in exile on the Black Sea, where he was sent. He
I
was, but he was a piece of work as a poet. Oh my God! I mean, quick, quick, quick. So I tend to like people like that.
now so you're teaching English, and then we know the year of 1999, this fabulous year that happened. Were you surprised by getting so much recognition for what you were doing in this drinks milieu that you created?
Well, it took a couple years. First it was just a guy on Esquire's website, but I got out and about in the city, and I met a bunch of people, and I got along with them, and it really was a recognition of lost members of the tribe. That was, in the larger sense, that's really what was happening in 1999 and 2000, 2001, 2002 is a widely scattered group of people who had parallel and often very closely converging interests in not just like cocktails, but in like sort of convivial culture, cocktail, the world of that went with cocktails. They were all identifying each other and gathering, and it was a great time for that. And that's that. So suddenly I had all kinds of new friends, and it happened very quickly. Suddenly I'm hanging out with Dale DeGroff, and I'm like, wow, I get this guy. This guy gets me. We can have a very pleasant time having a cocktail and talking about stuff, and it went on from there. It turned out that it had been one of my interests. It wasn't my main interest, but it turned out that was the same with everybody, and that one interest brought together people who had a lot of other interests in common. I mean, Dale and I could talk about Roy Eldridge, the jazz trumpeter. I was writing jazz criticism at the time, so that was my other big thing, and that was very fun. And that gave me plenty to talk about with a lot of people, a lot of things like that. So it was very interesting.
I feel I left New York in 2003. And I do remember I was always interested in bars. I love trying the new bars. I love, being a layman, I guess. I was never a bartender. I never worked in the bar business, but I did like to hang out at some. And I do remember little inklings of, talking about all of a sudden you go to a place for martinis, say Temple
Right.
Bar, or I remember a friend of mine got married at Dale DeGroff's bar.
The Rainbow Room.
Sorry, the Rainbow Room. Yeah, so sorry.
Yeah.
He got married at the Rainbow Room and sitting at the bar and having drinks there. And I was lucky enough to go to Milk and Honey and Angel Share and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I had that experience, and I feel that I left December 2003, and all of a sudden, that's when it kind of started to explode with the Atlantic and all of that. I kind of missed that there, but I did move over to London where it was sort of happening at the same time.
It was big. I was drinking in London by then.
And I wish I had known all of you then in New York, because it would have been great to drink with.
It would have been great. Exactly. Yeah. No, you would have been very welcome. I said, it was a friendly crew.
It was, and that's when Tales kind of started to, all these things started to germinate and make it, the great culture that it is now.
It had been going already in New York for quite some time. I don't know if you remember Grange Hall.
Of course.
They had a great bar, with great bartenders who knew the cocktails and made them with care and precision and brio. A little bit of just flair, not like flair bartending flair, but flair. Right. And that place was fantastic. And there were already a few places, but Lansky
Lounge.
Yep.
I remember Lansky.
Really, it was. You're right. It was 2003, 2004 that put things into overdrive.
Mm-hmm. Well, we could talk here all day about the different cocktails, cocktail bars in New York. But now, so you're sitting there, you're writing for Esquire, you're doing your thing. Now I have, by the way, it's all.
I see a stack of familiar books. Yeah.
Yep. When did you think, okay, it's time that the world hears about famous bartenders, historical famous bartenders like Jerry Thomas? And how did you start to even conceive Imbibe?
It started, with my Esquire gig where I was interested in history. And so I kind of turned the little essays on the weekly cocktail. There was always a historical bent. If I could find the history of a drink, I would talk about that. And it was often not the one that you heard, So I knew it was rich territory. But things really started one day in a bar in Brooklyn, a new bar at the time. I think it was called Toast. It was a bar and restaurant that specialized in toast. I'm not kidding.
Hey, it's New York.
It was New York. And I was at a birthday gathering for my friend Andrea Strong, who I'd been on a press trip with. And I got invited, and I start talking to these people. And it turns out they are from Slow Food, the organization, or members of Slow Food. And I said, well, the cocktail originally was a slow food art. Everything was handmade, et cetera, et cetera. And you take a person like Jerry Thomas, the guy who wrote the first cocktail book. I was, and I was off talking about this and how he was really a slow food artist and how wonderful it would be to do a tribute to him. And the people, Alan Katz, who now owns New York Distilling Company, Sean Kelly, who was a bigwig at Pernod Ricard and now at Cocktail Kingdom, and Anna Jovancicevic, who's a drinks industry PR, powerhouse. But at the time, they were, fairly young in their careers. And I'm talking with them, and they say, well, yeah, let's do it. And they were very organized, so we did it. And as part of that, I had to research a little booklet to put out that Ted Hay, Dr. Cocktail, and I put together commemorating this event that we did for Jerry Thomas. And as part of the booklet, I wrote a little bio of him, a one-page bio. But I did, a ridiculous amount of research for it. And that convinced me that I could actually do a book based on him. And originally, I come from classical scholarship. I was going to do a commentary on his book. So it would just be like, here's his book, and then I'd have notes at the bottom of every page. But nobody would buy that. So it sort of changed. It's still a commentary on his book, but it got bigger and more idiosyncratic and less academic. But that became Imbibe eventually.
Well, it's interesting. When I first started my podcast over 4 years ago, and I'll give him a shout out, Tom Soden, who owns 9 Lives here, who was my spiritual guru, as I called him. And I said, look, do I have to do this well? Do I have to be a bartender? He said, no, you don't have to do that. What you have to do is you have to read 3 books. Get these books and read them. Okay. One was Art of the Cocktail, Dale DeGraw. Mm-hmm. One was Joy of Mixology, okay, Gary Regan. And one was Imbibe. And so I ran out and bought those. I don't know if I still know enough, but I started the podcast anyway.
It seems like you're doing pretty well.
So did you expect it to, get the kind of attention that it did and garner the press that it did and win a James Beard Award and all of that?
I guess yes and no is the weaselly answer, because I knew that there was a place for it, but I was sort of demoralized because I had a hell of a time selling the book. Craft of the Cocktail and Joy of Mixology had already come out. I didn't want to do another book like that. They had already covered all that. I wanted to do like the cocktail book for the people who already had those books and wanted to go further back into the foundations of the craft. And I thought, hey, everybody will buy this. And then I thought, nobody's going to buy this. And then it came out and some people bought it. So it kind of went in between, but it got a lot of attention. And that was a surprise. The James Beard Award was a surprise and a very pleasant one. No cocktail book had ever won that award. So I was happy just to be nominated. I was stunned to actually win it, but it showed the sort of the pent up demand for serious cocktail books, for books that brought more to the plate that weren't aimed just at the beginner. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And then we've seen a number of books afterwards that have followed on that path. So, but
yeah,
it was
absolutely. Actually, on my shelf, it's nestled in between your next book, Punch, which we're going to talk about in a second, and my own copy of
there you go.
How to Mix Drinks, which is a 1927 copy, because I used to trawl, and I'm sure I bumped into you, the Strand.
Oh, of course.
For cocktail books. So this was before I was even doing this when I was in New York, and they were like $1 each.
They were so cheap.
Right. And so I have quite a nice collection here. But now Punch. So followed up to that, you win this award. It's fabulous. Were you thinking, great, I can just go back to my day job. I'm not going to write any more books? Or,
no.
Yeah.
There's not money like that in writing cocktail books, I'll tell you.
Right, exactly.
It's finally earned out, and I finally get royalties for it, but it took a while. Punch was supposed to be easy because
that means it wasn't.
That was not. I turned in Imbibe at ridiculously over length because it had a huge section on punches, because Jerry Thomas's original book did. And my editor saw the length of the manuscript and she said, no, we're not publishing this. This is way over contract length. This is not possible. You're going to have to cut a lot. And I looked at it and I realized the easiest way to cut it was to get rid of the punch section, which made sense and brought Imbibe into focus, because the punch section, as I believed, was really not Jerry Thomas's anyway. That was mostly from his publishers, because all the recipes were compiled from other books, and then the short drinks you couldn't find those anywhere, but the others I was able to track down most of them elsewhere. And so I realized, okay, that was probably their original book, had a lot of punches, and then they hired a bartender. And I knew this because Phil Green, who now writes wonderful cocktail history books, his brother is a copyright lawyer and found the original copyright for me that the publisher filed, and Jerry Thomas's name was nowhere on it.
Oh, how interesting.
That Dick and Fitzgerald filed, and they filed it 3 years before the book came out. So clearly they had one book and then they didn't like it. They got a bartender and did another book. So I was going back to their idea and let's do a separate book on punches, and I'll just take all the punches I cut and write an introduction and it'll be done. But then it turns out I did more research and I learned a ton more, and more sources were available every year. And so I had to do more research. And it turns out that it took a long time to write that book. And it was actually quite difficult, but just because I had to learn all kinds of things that I didn't know. And, but, it came out far less successful than Imbibe, unfortunately, but still it's out there and it has its fans. It's my favorite one of my drinks books, personally, because I think it came out the best.
I think I have a penchant for the Esquire drinks.
Well, that's a fun one. That's
only because I love the rules.
The rules are fun. The captions, they stuck me with stupid stock photographs, but I got to write the captions. So I had a blast just basically screwing around with the photographs.
Let me correct that. I love all of your books.
Well, thank you.
But that I found a signed copy. So I feel
excellent. Excellent.
So, but I do love the, your road doesn't need a drink.
Yeah.
That's what
Esquire definitely they set a high standard in terms of just breezy writing, and I really had to throw aside all my academic ways and just kind of find the writer inside.
I know, it's funny that you say that you didn't think you were a good writer before, because your writing style is so wonderful. And I'm not just saying that because you're right here, but it's just so easy to read that it just seems inherent that you would always have been this.
Oh, that took a lot of training from editors, not in academia. I was very fortunate. I had a wonderful editor at the Village Voice, Chuck Eddy, who was just great, and is a great rock critic and just a really good line editor. And then at the New York Times, I had Fletcher Roberts, a great editor. I had Terra Thomas at Wine and Spirits magazine, who I started writing for early on. And I had a number, Brendan Vaughan, Ross McCammon at Esquire, David Granger, the editor-in-chief. These were all people who just really, really got me to focus on this. Now, I have Noah Rothbaum, the same, who don't indulge my worst tendencies, but, got me to write stuff that people would actually want to read.
It is amazing. I remember the first time I wrote something for a newspaper. It was the first thing I've ever written for a newspaper. It was a big newspaper. I'm so excited. I sent it in and he said, no.
Yeah.
He said, he's like, this is more Question Time. We need the one show. Question Time is like the most boring political show. We need the one show is like, Kathy Lee Gifford, all that.
Yeah.
And he actually rewrote my first 3 paragraphs of how it should be. And literally from that moment, he didn't have to do that. He could have just said, no, we're getting someone else.
Right.
Knowing that I was starting out, he was so good about that. So I understand an editor really, trying to get the best out of you.
I needed a lot of that kind of editing early on. And eventually I internalized it. And
we're here now. Now, so are you thinking of writing another book?
Well, I'm almost done with another book right now. That I'm the editor-in-chief of the Oxford Companion to Spirits and Cocktails, which is a massive
that's huge,
job.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and I've been working on that for about 8 years, on and off. And we're in the final stages of it right now. God help me. It's a brutal job, but it's fascinating. I've learned so much while writing this and expanded my knowledge in a lot of different ways. It's been a real eye-opener.
In the 8 years that you've been doing this, have you had to add a whole lot more, like every year add something new to it?
Every year I've added research for sure. More and more sources become available and everything changes. It's taken so long because we're trying to throw out the standard stories and find, we're trying to go back to primary sources rather than things that have been repeated a million times in a crappy game of telephone from not very reliable sources of 50 years ago. We're trying to actually find original, fresh information where possible on this stuff. And that takes a long time.
I'm sure it does. Now, everything changes, as you said. I was just listening to your podcast again, Life Behind Bars. And I was looking through, I was like, I have listened to all of them, but I thought, I'm meeting David. I have to refresh. I have to refresh what I remember. And I went back to the one that you did for December 2019. On what the year ahead would be.
Oh, boy, were we wrong.
But before we get to that, why in 2017 you decided to start Life Behind Bars? And where did the podcast emerge from?
Oh, it came from Noah, from my partner in crime there. It was his idea. I'm not a podcast listener, sorry, I don't even listen to mine.
I don't take it personally. It's fine.
And so it was a little strange for me, but it turns out to be a lot of fun, and I really enjoy doing it. Noah and I get to talk, and then we get guests on and get to talk to them. And it's been a fun, pleasant thing to do that has, brought new readers in. And so I'm very happy to do it. But I was skeptical at first. It was like, who's going to listen to the two of us just talking about
I feel the same way. It's like, number one, I don't come from this drinking background.
Right.
I love bartenders, and I was on a press trip because I used to write about luxury travel. I still do sometimes. And, they feed you so much. And one day I was like, I'm in Italy. I just can't eat so much.
Right.
And we went to a lemon theme restaurant, and I ordered a limoncello because they made it there. And I thought, you know what? I prefer this drinking thing way more than the eating thing right now. I went back, talked to the bartender, loved his story, and thought, gosh. And this was 2016. I wonder if there are any podcasts that have this. Of course, there were some. A lot were B2B, business to business.
Right.
There's the mixology talk.
No, there are very few kind of consumer ones.
Yeah, and even mine, I'm not even sure is that consumer, but I'm trying, hoping it is that people will want to listen to all of your stories. I certainly do, and that, I thought, who's really going to listen to me? And then it seems that people do. So
people do.
Maybe they have nothing to do, but they want to listen. And I have the cocktails, and of course I have people like you on my show. So of course they want to listen.
Yeah, but it turns out it's fun, and people, spend a lot of time in cars. There's a lot of places and times when it's nice to have some company. And so we just try to be companionable.
I think, given what this year has become, that yours plays such a vital role in helping the people that we love, get heard, the bartenders, the people who are really suffering, your series with Bullet. What you're saying is really important, and what you're doing is really important. You're helping people, and this is their voice, and they don't get to have their voices heard so much right now as their bars are closing.
That we definitely took seriously, and we're very happy to have some really wonderful people on and give them, at least a chance to talk about this and bring it before the public, some of the challenges that they're dealing with. Who knows where things are going to go? It's not going to be pretty, but hopefully we'll continue to do that, because it's like a comet hit the bar industry, and we're just picking up the pieces right now. But bartenders are resilient above all. So there's
absolutely. And I'm hoping, I was lucky enough to be invited to the last night of Milk and Honey here.
Oh my God. I wish I had been there.
Which, they're like, what do you want to drink? And I said, well, there are only two things I can drink here: the London Calling and the penicillin. Because if you can't have those here, then, I don't want to have them anyplace else. I want to have them here. And, it was heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. And I'm just hoping, I think Ivy Mix said it on your show, and I don't know her, but she said that, and she hopes, and I really believe this will happen, that if we get something that can cure this, that these 20s will be just like the 1920s. Yeah. I believe everyone is going to travel and go crazy. Yep, they are just going crazy.
No, now we know what we've lost. It's we don't take it for granted anymore. Yeah, it's going to be nuts. I spent so much time traveling around America on like stupid sort of domestic business travel, right? And that I don't miss, but the rest of it's funny. It's like I've learned that, okay, maybe when this is over, I'll do less of that, and I'll save the travel for places I really want to go, and not do this sort of wake up at 6 a.m. and get on a plane and fly in and do my event, and then have a quick dinner and go to bed and get up at 6 a.m. the next day and fly out. I'll try to really appreciate the places I'm at, because I wasn't doing that. And now, the idea of being in Chicago and not spending an extra day, like going to bookstores and walking along the lake and getting tacos out in the western part of town where it's all Mexican. That would just be awful to me. It's like...
No, I agree. It also has made me appreciate the bars that I have near me. And a wonderful bar has just opened down the street.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It is fantastic. But again, will we have a shutdown like Manchester where everything is closed and they have to disappear and start anew? So it has made me value the bars that are really close to me because I want them to stay open because they have been so good to me during this time.
Yeah,
that we've
yeah.
had.
I mean, we need all of our neighborhood institutions, particularly the ones that have been really like part of the neighborhood. That's another thing I've learned is that's really those are the bars that I think are the most valued. Those are the ones that are going to come back, I think, are the ones that are woven into the fabric of their neighborhoods, not the ones that are, a couple of investors sponsored another branch of a successful bar and nobody's really like invested and it was just there to get people on Saturday night. But the places that are just, the owner lives around the corner type places, those I'm really, really protective of.
I totally agree. And actually, what made me laugh was one of your I guess your headlines of something that you wrote, which was "Forget sourdough starter. You should pre-batch cocktails." That was one of my favorite ones.
What the hell, right?
Every time I interviewed someone, they would give me like the guys from the Savoy and some from the Colonnade who I already knew. Every recipe they would give me was for a batch cocktail. Like, okay. If you want your Savoy martinis, this is how you make them in bulk. And put it in the freezer and don't take it out. Also, Giorgio at the Colonnade was like, okay, this is how you make 4 different kinds of Negronis. You need 4 big bottles. I love that. And I thought, this is yes, you're getting it. You'll have a good drink.
That's what you need now. Yeah, I think the article I did was, fill up these 3 bottles with this mix, and then you can turn this mix into each one of these mixes into 3 or 4 different drinks. And, suddenly you've got like a drink program for when you can't make it to the local bar for takeout drinks or whatever. But,
these recipes are from the best. They're from you. They're from the Savoy. Yeah. You couldn't get better than that.
Well, I wish I had drinks from the Savoy right now. I'll tell you that much. And the Connaught, I wish I had one of Ago's martinis. Oh my God. That would be phenomenal. For a while there I think it was 2018, it seemed like every time I went to an airport, I ran into Ago. It was like in the most unlikely places, Los Angeles. Wait a minute. What are you doing here? Be in London, in Rome, or wherever, suddenly there's Ago Perona. That was amazing. That was extremely pleasant. I mean, what a sweet guy and a good guy he is.
Absolutely. And the next time you're in London, Ago's martinis on me. Okay?
It's a deal. Very happily.
Now, one last thing. When is your book coming out? The Oxford edition?
Well, we're hoping for next fall. So right. we're piling on the steam or piling on the coal right now and building up the steam and trying to get this thing done. But oh Lord, it's a lot of work. It's a big pile of work.
Well, I so look forward to that. More than that, I look forward to either having a drink with you in New York or a drink here in London.
Either way, I'll be in London for sure.
Thank you. And it is such a joy for me to have you on. You, as not only are you the Dean of Cocktails, as I said, you are a wonderful, prolific, and fabulous writer. And it was a joy.
Well, God bless you. God bless you. Right?
You too.
I'm blushing.
Okay, we'll leave you blushing then. I couldn't leave David without asking for his top tips for the home bartender and where he would have a drink right now if he could choose anywhere in the world.
Well, learn 2 or 3 cocktails and learn to make them without a recipe. So you can just throw them together like you were, boiling an egg. I mean, that's really the best thing you can do. You don't need to know 80 cocktails. You don't need to know the most abstruse and weird and cutting edge cocktails. If you can make an old fashioned just like as easy as rolling out of bed and, a martini and a daiquiri, you will be so popular with your friends and you will always be happy because you'll always have a good drink at your fingertips.
Fabulous. And if you could drink anywhere right now, where would that be?
I think if I could be anywhere right now, it would be at Bar Camparino in Milano, right across from the Duomo there, which is just the classic Italian aperitivo bar. And I just miss that so much. I miss that whole culture. I miss being in Italy, and that would just really amuse the hell out of me.
How can I thank David enough for being on the show? It is such a privilege to welcome him to the Lush Life family. So what could be his pick for our cocktail of the week? It's one of the oldies, but has since been improved. David's choice for our cocktail of the week is the improved Holland Gin Cocktail. If you want to know its history, well, you'll just have to buy his book Imbibe. Let's just say it started life as an old-fashioned. Add the following ingredients to a mixing glass. 2 ounces of Oud Genever or another rich Genever. 1 bar spoon of rich simple syrup, which is 2-to-1 Demerara sugar to water. 1 scant bar spoon of orange curacao. 2 to 3 dashes of aromatic bitters. And 1 dash of absinthe. Add cracked ice and stir. Then strain it into a chilled cocktail glass and twist a swatch of thin-cut lemon peel over the top. You'll find this recipe plus more gin recipes and all the cocktails of the week at alushlifemanual.com, where you'll find all the ingredients in our shop. They say you should never meet your heroes. Well, they are wrong. Meeting David Wondrich was such a delight, and I was so touched that he took the time to be on Lush Life. I only wish I had known him when I was living in New York. He would have been a fabulous drinking companion. I can't wait to have that first cocktail with him, anywhere, anytime. If you live for Lush Life, make sure you're giving back to the bars you love by donating or taking part in cocktail delivery where you live. Theme music for Lush Life is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. And Lush Life is always and will be forever produced by Terra and Simpler Media Productions. Which leaves me to say the wise words of Oscar Wilde: all things in moderation, including moderation, and always drink responsibly and wash your hands and wear a mask. Next week, we're taking a short break for Thanksgiving, so see you in a few weeks. Until that time, bottoms up.